do have our next presenter available, and I first wanted to apologize. I did not introduce myself when I came up earlier. My name is Lynette Hollis, and I am the program director for the Prevention Resource Center for the City of Lubbock in the Behavioral Health Department. So I want to introduce Sybille. Sybille Neuber has immigrated from Germany to the United States in 1996. After the death of her youngest child by suicide 7 years ago, she became a volunteer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, to raise awareness about mental illness, addiction, and suicide, and to break the stigma associated with it. She is now the chair for the West Texas chapter of AFSP. At her church, Sybille is the leader of the Spiritual Life Committee. She established a grief ministry and is the facilitator for Grief Share, which is a faith-based grief seminar and support group. Her interest in recovery brought her to volunteer with the Adolescent Support Network, which is a nonprofit supporting teens struggling with substance use. Sybille holds a master's degree from Texas Tech University in occupational therapy and actually has the same degree from Germany. She is currently at Trust Point Rehabilitation Hospital in Lubbock, and she also has her own private occupational therapy practice, ergotherapy and wellness, where she uses a holistic approach to address clients' physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. She teaches a warm water arthritis class, which I might have to take, and speaks in the community about various topics, such as fall prevention, arthritis, non-medical pain management, grief, and mental health. Please help me welcome Sybille.
Be careful going down. I guess good afternoon, everybody. What a hard thing to follow all the speakers from this morning. On top of that, after lunch, it's my nap time too. So bear with me, and I have my notes because sometimes I get carried away and then I lose my train of thought. So I thought I better do a good job here. And I'm just so impressed for all of you to be here. How beautiful for so many people interested in recovery and all that goes with it here in Lubbock. So much has happened, so much more to do, but I'm just glad you all are here, and I'm so grateful that I was invited to speak about something I'm so passionate about. Sadly, that passion had to happen after we lost our youngest son, Daniel, to suicide in 2016. He had struggled with mental health issues and addiction for about 5 years before that, and I really felt, was it Laura, the first speaker? Was her name Laura? I mean, our stories are very similar. The change that we saw in our children, the struggle, the in and out of rehab, and then finally that end, that tear in our hearts, that we lose them. So I just started volunteering for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention because any life we can save is awesome. And I know personally that with our program and what I've done, we have saved lives. And that's what it's all about. So do I need to point it there? Where do I point it? I don't know. Yeah, but does it not? Do I need to point this somewhere else? Okay, you might have to do it that way. Okay, originally I was asked to present together with Ann Kasaragi. Many of you know her, but she was unable to do so because she has some voice issues. Speaking, my voice might give out as I speak too, but not as bad as hers. So if you'd go on. So what we're going to talk about here today is twofold. I think you have to know our organization and have to know where we come from to really appreciate the Talk Saves Life, that real education part that comes afterwards. Without knowing who we are and what we do and how we do it, you might not appreciate it as much. So our mission as for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is provide hope for those affected by suicide and save lives. And that's our position statement. Again, this actually goes in hand with the next slide, really going down to the 4 pillars of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The pillars are research, which is a big one. I'm a nerd. And I really liked in that first presentation, I missed some of the others, but you know, the evidence-informed or evidence-based information that we're getting. So really important to have that scientific background. Otherwise, you might just do whatever, but you never know if it really works or not. So research is a big part of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The next part is education. That's what I am personally very passionate about. And then advocacy and support for those who have had a suicide in their lives. So the first pillar is research, and I have to go to my notes here because there is too much to remember, because the research is really extensive that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does. It's actually one of the largest, or the largest private suicide research provider in the nation. So they have monthly research roundups where they present the newest information, the newest research that is out there, and that is all found on their website. They co-host an international summit on suicide research. They do training for researchers through virtual courses. Of course, now, especially after COVID, everybody is big on virtual. They present research findings at any kind of conferences. They share the findings, of course, there too. Research Connection is a program where chapters, we're not doing that here in West Texas, but other chapters throughout the nation invite researchers. It's mainly for the LGBTQ plus population, research about them and suicide prevention. Anyway, so it's a conference that is put on by several chapters throughout the nation. They have a newsletter and videos all online, and I went through that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I hadn't even noticed that. There is so much on there. There is so much research, so many videos that have the newest data and the newest information. So I was flabbergasted when I actually went to it. I knew it was there. I just never had looked at it. And then a big thing is our evidence-informed or evidence-based education programs that we provide, and also research-supported advocacy. Let's go to the next one. So that's my passion, is education. We have education programs throughout the lifespan, I would say. If you start on the right, that's Gizmo. It's a cute little dog. It's a book about that dog and his experience with his mental health issues, how he reaches out to a trusted adult, what he does self-care-wise, and so on. So everything we talk to the adults and to the teenagers about just on a child level, even has a plan for them to come up with what they're going to do if they're in a spot where they're really down and not feeling so well. So cute book. It's mainly geared for 4th graders, but can be used almost everywhere in the elementary school level. And then the next one is It's Real. We have 3 versions of that. We have the one for college kids that is a video-based program. Then we have the one for high schoolers, and it just came out in August is the one for middle schoolers. We had gone to the leadership conference in January, and that was the consensus of all the ones presenting education program, that we did not cover the middle school. And as we heard this morning too, you have to start there already. The average age of mental health struggle starting is 9 years old. That's even earlier than that. So we really have to start at a young age to talk to them about it. So I was really excited to getting that middle school curriculum come to fruition. Then next on that, if you're going to the left, is the More Than Sad. And that's our original program for high schoolers. I've presented that several times. It had videos of those struggling with mental health issues in various ways. And I honestly have to say, after seeing those videos, it opened my eyes in the signs and things that I had missed about our son, because he was, some people just get down, they isolate themselves, but he was more the troublemaker. And what happens with the troublemakers in school? They just get labeled as troublemakers. Nobody realizes that they're actually struggling with a mental health issue. So it really opened my eyes. What they found in their research is that it wasn't that well received anymore by the teenagers. So they found that it's really not appropriate anymore. Like everything changes, so it had to be changed, and that's when they came up with the It's Real for Teens. So I was really glad. I really liked the new curriculum, but I still sometimes use the old curriculum, the More Than Sad, for parents and for teachers, because it was really informative, and it really helped open those eyes and open those communication levels. And then we have Talk Saves Lives. Talk Saves Lives is a main program for adults, and the general one is the first one they came up with, okay? They're actually yesterday, I got an email that they're looking for input, what needs to be changed in this one too. So again, constant change to keep up with what is needed, what works, what does the research say. So they just recently, I think in spring they came out with the Latinx module and with the Veterans module. And I'm glad to say that for the West Texas chapter, since yesterday, we have somebody trained in the Latinx one. We need a lot more because we're a largely Hispanic area, but that's a great start. So we have somebody to present that. The other special modules, and AFSP just looked at making those specific to that population, like the Latinx population, really speaking to them, because the cultures are different. So really capturing those cultural differences and really talking to those people. So we have the LGBTQ plus module. We have a one for veterans. I said that. We have one for seniors, because again, it's a little bit different than if you are in life and, in the middle or at the beginning of your life. We have one for the workplace. It's especially made for the workplace. It has a little bit more scientific presentation character. And I was trying to decide which one are we going to do today. Are we going to do the workplace one, or are we going to do the regular one? And I decided on the regular one because it still has all that general information in it. And then we have one for corrections. That means it's not for the inmates in the correction system, but those working in the correction system. And that goes in hand with our Project 2025. The original Project 2025 was meant to reduce the suicide rate by 25% by 2025. I don't think we're going to make that, but I'm going to talk more about the other components of 2025. And lastly, we have that specific module for firearms and suicide prevention. If you have gone by our table outside, we do have gun locks that we give out. So we're in West Texas, is that right? So who has a gun at their house? Ooh, I'm surprised. Not more? Okay. I guess I don't have the regular West Texas representation here. So anyway, we're not taking guns away. All we're saying is be safe with guns, have the lock on it if you have children in the house, as well if you have somebody in the house that is struggling with mental health or addictions. And that's to the education part. Let's go on to advocacy. So there is advocacy done at all levels. We're trying to do some local advocacy, going on to state advocacy. We have the state advocacy days, and then National Advocacy Summit in Washington, D.C., where we send representatives. And really, AFSP each year chooses 2 or 3 specific legislatures that are about to be voted on or about to be introduced to focus on that. If you look at the, hopefully you all know that the suicide hotline is now 988. It's not that long number that it was before. AFSP was greatly involved in getting that through the legislature, on top of other entities, but AFSP was largely involved in that. And I know one of our last year's efforts that we did was to get the 988 stations covered. So we have them in place, we have the 988 number, but we need more money to actually have them all staffed so that no call is dropped, so that you actually get somebody on the line as you call that number. So big efforts that are going on. And lastly, becoming a field advocate. Everybody should be a field advocate. I have the link there where you can apply. It doesn't take much. You fill out some information, and then you get emails about the legislator or specific things that AFSP is working on. And all you do is click on the button and you send it to all the representatives. You can actually even add your personal story to it if you would like to, and makes it more personal, but you do get answers back. You get first a regular email that it was received and so on, and then you get an answer back. And I know one of our board members, she had gotten a very personal message back even from one of our representatives. So neat thing to advocate for those issues that need solving or need to get better in our nation or in our state. The next one talks about suicide loss support. The first one on there is the Survivor Day, the International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, which is actually coming up November 18th. Here in Lubbock, we have one. I have information outside on the table with the flyer. If you're interested, if you know somebody who has experienced a suicide close to them, or if you have a place where you can hang up that flyer, come by afterwards and get a flyer and get that out in the community that everybody knows this is available. This is just the support. A suicide loss is very different from a regular loss. I just earlier talked to somebody about it that we usually don't talk about it. Not me. But you know what usually happens? You don't even know that that person died by suicide. And it's hush hush. We don't want to talk about it. There's so much guilt and shame associated with it. And we got to break that. And we got to give those suicide loss survivors really the support they need. Then once a year, there is a long-term suicide loss summit. I personally have not gone to one, but if that loss has been several years ago, that is something where you can get additional support, because that loss always stays there. Your heart is always broken. It's not going to heal. You get to live with it, but that loss is still there. Healing Conversations is a personal, almost like a counseling support for those who have lost a loved one to suicide. They will be matched with somebody in their area to talk to reach out to after suicide loss. Very helpful, especially shortly after the suicide loss. We have things like the Memory Quilt program. We have a after suicide toolkit for schools, and some of the schools here in Lubbock have that in place. And then we're trained suicide support group facilitators. So AFSP itself does not have a suicide support group, but we train facilitators to have those groups. I know that Ann Kazaragi, the one who was supposed to present with me, she has that, I don't know if she still has it, but she had a support group that was meeting online, and they were going for quite a long time, and she had people from all over join in that support group. For the next one. Okay, before we start this video, I want you each to get together with your neighbor, because one thing with suicide, like I said earlier, is we don't talk about it. It's sometimes even hard to mention the word suicide. So I want you to get together with your neighbor, one, then together with two people from other tables, and I want you to use the word suicide in a sentence. Doesn't matter what, just getting used to using it. So talk to your neighbor to one neighbor at your table, use suicide in a sentence, then go to another table and use that with two different people. We're just going to do that for just a moment. Don't be shy, it's okay. I know everybody loves those activities. And I know this is not everybody's favorite activity, but you might have met somebody that you didn't know before. You might have made a new connection. How about that? Let's all come back together. How was that? Are you confident speaking about suicide, saying the word suicide? If not, get used to it. We got to talk about it. We got to use that dreaded word that nobody wants to use. Okay, I want to ask you all to get back to your tables, because this next one is really important. Talk Away the Dark is the PSA campaign that AFSP has started in May for Mental Health Awareness Month. They came up with this PSA to spread the word about what it means to talk about suicide, to asking somebody how they're doing, to asking somebody that you notice that they are not doing so well. So let's go to the video. And it's very dark. So let's listen to that. It's on the next page.
Pass the ketchup.
No.
Dad, are you okay?
Yeah, just stressed out.
Oh, and the melody is sounding so much better. I can play it for you. Wait, where's your guitar?
I gave it to your cousin.
What? That guitar's like your favorite thing.
I don't need it anymore. Some days are just better than others.
I think you should go talk to someone.
It's not that easy.
Have you been thinking about suicide? You can talk to me, Dad.
When I saw that for the first time, it really touched me. It's a little bit hard because with the light here, you don't get the whole feeling of it. But really that darkness going into somebody, the darkness they are in, and getting darker and darker. You saw several things that point towards that person possibly struggling or being suicidal, and then the daughter just flat out asking. And that's what it's all about. We got to talk, we got to ask, we got to reach out to one another and reach out ourselves if we have the strength to do that in that moment. So we're going to go over a few data here. And when I saw this, I was kind of not happily surprised that for the longest time, the United States average suicide rates, and that talks about the rate per 100,000 individuals. So Texas has always been below that, which is a good thing, which is kind of surprising because of the area we're in, but we've always been below. Now, that's the latest data from 2021. For the first time, we surpassed the national rate, meaning Texas has a long way to go. We really got to do something to get those rates down again. Okay, next slide. And I apologize, this is not my favorite slide, my favorite image that I found about that. It talks about the age of the main ages of somebody dying by suicide. On the bottom right, oh, maybe that works. Can I do that? No, it doesn't work either. The bottom right, that's a long-term trend. That's from 2000 to 2020. So really a long-term trend. You saw a lot of rise in the rates, so it's how they changed in those 20 years. So a rise in the younger population and in the late middle-aged population. Lower rate for the elderly and for the completely middle-aged. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but anyway, that rise, and that's what we don't want to see. And in the top slide, you see that actually it used to be that the highest rate for suicide is middle-aged men. Okay, now we're getting to the point where actually the elderly are higher than that. That's that black line that ends up all the way at the top on the right side. So meaning, whoever thought about the elderly dying by suicide? You don't think about that because nobody talks about it. But, think about, their friends dying, family might be absent. So reach out to your elderly family members. It's very important. And then you see that the rate for the 0 to 15-year-old or 14-year-olds is fairly low. However, we see an increase in that, which is not what we want to see. And then very high rates still about the middle-aged men. Okay, next. By race and ethnicity, American Indians are highest on the list, followed by Caucasians. Actually, that's not correct. So white males are highest, and then the rest come. The American Indians follow very closely. Black, female, and men are lower on the end. If you notice, Hispanics are not included in that. This is all data from the CDC, and they did not include Hispanics because they say many Hispanics are also part one of the others. So they report Hispanics individually, and when the average suicide rate, that's individuals by 100,000, comparing to 100,000, is usually 15.9, I believe, and Hispanics rate is, I have to lie because I forgot to write that down, but I think it was 8.9. It was significantly lower. So Hispanics tend to have lower suicide rates. Doesn't mean no Hispanics die by suicide, but they have lower suicide rates. And I think if you look at it, the Hispanic culture has a lot more family connections. There's a lot more of that support there that is really healthy for somebody struggling. If we go to the next slide. Disproportionately affected, we said there is the Caucasian, so white, middle-aged men, they are still highest. And again, you don't hear about it. But I just know of definitely one that has passed within the last month here in Lubbock. And by the way, it's really difficult to get local data about suicide. It's very difficult. 2 years ago, I found some statistics. Of course, they're old now. You can't use them anymore because that was 2 years ago. And it's always later ago. So we're always lacking about 2 years behind with the data. I really tried to find information about Lubbock. I went everywhere. Hard to find. You probably have to talk to the coroner or something like that. But it's very hard to come by that information. It would be interesting to see where we are at now in Lubbock. The older adults, we talked about that. Veterans have a high suicide rate. And I think many of you are aware of that. So we really need to reach out to our veterans. The LGBTQ plus community also. Native Americans, the other category that most people don't think about, but I'm very interested as working in a physical rehabilitation place, is those with chronic conditions, those with pain conditions. There's actually 2 pain conditions that are called the suicide disease. One is trigeminal neuralgia, and the other is CRPS. If you don't know what that is, no worries. You're good off not to know or not to have to know. But because those are very severe pain conditions, those tend to have higher rates of suicide. Also, the traumatic brain injury population. I really like Laura at the first talk this morning. She kind of mentioned how things change in the brain, and the same is the case with traumatic brain injuries. A lot of people that had a traumatic brain injury might be mild, might be severe, whatever it is. Their thinking is not quite as clear. They tend to be more impulsive. They tend to have not so good problem-solving skills, and both of that is indicative of a possibility or of a higher risk for suicide. And lastly, again, Lubbock, rural areas. Farmers, I didn't add those, but I know of a lot of farmers in our community that have died by suicide. And that is probably, I think there was one between I didn't even talk about the construction and oil and gas. I think there was one in between, I don't remember which it was, and then it was farmers. So those working construction are also at a high risk, as well as those who are working in oil and gas. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. I guess it's very high-stress jobs. That would be my thinking about that. I know with oil and gas, they are often away from their families, which, again, you lose that support system. Okay, next. Suicide methods, so over 50%, I think it's 58%, firearms are used. So that's the largest majority. That's why we're stressing firearm safety and firearm awareness. And especially, again, you guys are the odd ones out, because usually I would have expected at least half of the ones in attendance raise their hands that there is a firearm in the house, because we do, and I know a lot of other people do. Okay. Next one. So this is just some data from Texas. In the nation, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death. It used to be the 10th leading cause of death, and the same is the case with Texas. COVID came in, so COVID surpassed that and brought us to the 11th place. So suicide rates are higher than natural disaster and homicides combined. Also higher than automobile accidents. That's pretty shocking. For the age of 10 to 24, it is, this morning she said in Colorado, it's the first leading cause of death. In Texas, it's the second after accidents. So still very high, very scarily high. Next page. So, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is a national organization, and our West Texas chapter was just initiated September of last year. We were the last area of the nation not to be covered by a chapter. Now we do have a chapter, the chapter all the way on the left side, all the way from the tip of the Panhandle north of Amarillo to El Paso. That's our chapter. 84 counties. It's gigantic. But we're doing whatever we can. If you can pull up the next slide. So what we do here in our chapter, we do send people to the state Advocacy Day in Austin, as well as to Washington, D.C., and do want to have as many as possible field advocates here. I know all our board members are field advocates, and we're trying to get as many people as possible to become field advocates, because it's an easy way to really support our cause, to support suicide prevention. Next. Of course, we're a nonprofit, so we do have to do some fundraising. We have and that is kind of interesting, because before we became a chapter, we just did our thing. We did our walks and everything, but we weren't really responsible for it. Now we're responsible to have a balanced budget. It was a rude awakening for some of us. So we have our signature fundraisers, Out of the Darkness Walk. We had that just a month ago at the Ranching Heritage Center. And again, it's a fundraiser, but also serves as support for those who have lost somebody to suicide, as well as those who might have attempted a suicide or are struggling with mental health issues. And then for the first time this year, we had the campus walk in Lubbock ISD. Hopefully next year, Friendship ISD will join us with the campus walk. That's in the planning stages. But again, schools, we got to go. We got to get there to the kids to raise awareness. For the first time, we had a ride to fight, a ride. Excuse my pronunciation. Sometimes my kids probably would be appalled how I pronounce some things. They always tell me after, Mom, you said that wrong and this wrong. So I apologize. The Right to Fight Suicide, a motorcycle ride for suicide prevention, again, as a fundraiser and as awareness. We had that this spring also. And then, like outside the tables, we like to get in as many places as possible to provide our material, to raise awareness, to talk about what we're doing and what you can do to prevent suicides. So if you know a place that has a fair coming up, a health fair or anything, let us know. We'll be there if we can. Next. Then the education. We do basically all the education programs. I talked about one of our one of our members to be trained in the Latinx module now. So we'll give those programs as much as possible. Next. Then we have the International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. Again, I put the QR code there, but come outside afterwards, grab a flyer. If you would like to, I can send you a digital copy that you can pass on to anybody who needs it. I know we already have quite a few people signed up. It's going to be a Saturday, 3 hours from 9 to noon, just for information. Okay, next. Okay. Now, everybody get out your phones. Now it's a phone zone. Okay, please click on that the QR code. If you can, I hope you can. If not, that's okay. You can try the actual URL on the bottom and fill out that pre-survey. Again, we're research-based. We do a lot research-based, so fill that out. There's a few questions in there that ask what you understood or what you took away from the presentation. Don't worry about that. Just fill it out to your knowledge at this point. We just want to see if this program does what it's supposed to do, or if there's any areas that we still need to work on. And feel free to continue to finish that survey while we go on. The first part is not that important. But now we're going to get into the meat and bones of it, the things you really want to learn about suicide prevention. The first part was more information and, really spreading the word of what we're doing, because strange enough, it's amazing that a lot of people still don't know that we're here in Lubbock and don't know about all the things that we're providing and the things that we're doing. So we're gonna do the talk safe slides, and there is some objectives on the next slide. You can go on. But what I really want you to take away from that is for you personally, because we all can use it in our personal life. I'm sure there is one person at least you can think of that is struggling with mental health issues, or one person that you've been worried about. Might be a coworker even, might be a family member, might be a friend. I'm sure there is somebody you're worried about. But I also want you to take that back to your place of work. I know you all are coming from very different directions regarding what you work, but you all are passionate about recovery or avoiding or preventing drug use or recovery in general. So that fits in with all your places wherever you are. In the learning objectives, just want to tell you on the bottom what it says. It just states that this is for educational purposes only. This is not instead of going to get medical help or professional help. So this is just education purpose. You still need to go and get help from a professional if needed. Next one. And just, this is just to achieve the objectives. Here's the general overview. We're going to talk about suicide. We're going to talk about who it affects and what can be done. Next. You can go. So let's get started. That's what you all came for. So suicide is a complex public health issue. It's not as easy as some think. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But there can be warning signs, like if you have a health condition, like you have a heart problems or diabetes. There are warning signs that tell you something might be going on. And you look at those warning signs and you get the help you need. And there's also risk factors, like with the regular physical health condition, there is risk factors. In the same way, there is warning signs and risk factors with mental health conditions and with suicidal ideations. And if you go to the next slide, suicide can be prevented. And that prevention, okay, that's something I've sometimes struggled with, because suicides can be prevented. And actually, 94% of people do believe that suicide can be prevented. Will we be able to prevent all suicides? Probably not. And I always struggle with saying suicide can be prevented, because it can, but at the same time, I do not want to put any stress or any guilt on people that have lost somebody to suicide, because we did not prevent the death of our loved one. Can we prevent future deaths? Hopefully. That is the goal of it. But definitely for anybody who has lost somebody close to them to suicide, there should no guilt be attached with it, because usually we did our best. We did whatever we could with whatever we knew. The more you learn, the better you know how to do things. But life can be saved, especially if you allow time from that crisis, from that moment of a suicidal crisis. If you can get time between that and the person actually performing the suicide, that's where we save people, getting time between that. And getting them to decrease the suicidal ideation in that moment, and to get them help to get through it. Through noticing what's going on and through taking the accurate steps. Before we start going over the terminology, so before we start, I want to go over some terminology because it's very important to model the appropriate language to decrease the stigma that is associated with suicide. For example, we try to avoid the word committed suicide because what else do we commit? A crime. Suicide is not a crime. It's a mental health crisis. There's no crime associated with it. So we try to stay away from that term. And if you've ever used the word commit suicide, don't worry about it. Again, no guilt or anything with that. But we just want to raise awareness that it helps us to decrease the stigma by talking about it in the right way. And it's better to say somebody died by suicide or somebody ended their life. I still don't like the word killed themselves because, that reminds me too much of a crime either. So I do not use that, and I always shrug when people do that. So that is just my personal thing. They still have it on there. Maybe they're going to take it off sometime. I don't know. But that's just my personal thing. So, I usually say somebody died by suicide or somebody ended their life. And then if you look at phrases like if you look at failed or successful attempt, to say it's a failed or successful attempt for suicide is unnecessary. We don't have to do that. And it also implies some judgment when we say that. So instead, we encourage the use of phrases, somebody attempted a suicide or then died by suicide, whatever it is. And that just encourages help seeking and raises awareness and increases the risk avoidance in general. So trying to stay away from those terms on the left side is a good thing to do. The scope of the problem. So suicide is a global problem. And you can go to the next slide. The World Health Organization say over 700 people die by suicide each year. So that's an estimated number. So that's not an estimated number. We estimate the number to be much higher because this is worldwide. So there is a lot of countries there where suicide is really even more stigmatized than it is in the United States. And there, those deaths are not reported as suicide. Even if you look at the United States, the numbers are probably underreported also because when is an overdose an overdose and when is it a suicide? We cannot tell. We don't know. When is a car accident just an accident or a purposeful act? We don't know. Or most of the time, we don't know. So that's why we're thinking that the numbers are greatly underreported. Someone dies by suicide every 40 seconds. That's a great number. Let's go to the next slide. And most of the numbers for suicide are reported by the CDC, Center for Disease Control. In the United States, it's one of the leading causes. So I said that earlier, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death, more than motor vehicle crashes, homicide, and natural disaster combined. And, in the end, if you look at that, we got to start talking about suicide death the way we talk about other deaths. If we talk about somebody had a stroke, nobody worries about saying that. Somebody had a heart attack, nobody worries about saying that. I often talk, as you can tell, that's why I'm here. I like to talk about what happened to our son, how he died, the struggles he had before, not to make me feel guilty about anything, but to shine a light on it, to decrease that stigma that is still attached with it. And, even at my work, sometimes I'm just called to, and, if you believe in God, it's those God wings, when I'm called to talk to one of my patients about it. And usually it turns out they either lost a child or they had struggled with suicidal ideations or so on. But anyway, sometimes when I talk to other people and I share about our son dying at the age of 18, they of course ask, what he did, may I ask what he died of? And when I say suicide, it's still very seldom, it happens most of the time. It's literally almost like a curtain coming down and people don't know what to say anymore. If I had said, oh, it's a car crash, people would have said, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. But suicide, silence. Nobody knows how to talk about that. But, we got to treat it like any other death in the end. Okay, if you go to the next slide. For every suicide, there is 25 attempts. That's a huge number. And again, not all attempts are captured. That's well over 1 million Americans every year having a suicide attempt. And if I think let's say it that way, not everybody who has a suicide attempt will go on to die by suicide. But often there were several attempts of those that finally die by suicide. But not everybody who attempts a suicide will go on to die by it. So for the next slide, the loss is far-reaching. So there is a lot of implications for that. If you think about especially a young person dying by suicide, or it doesn't matter which age, there's a lot of people impacted. It's the family, it's friends, it's co-workers, might be the church, might be the youth group, might be neighbors, schools. There is a lot of people impacted by it. Actually, in fact, I know that last week, Plainview lost a 15-year-old by suicide and impacted the whole community. Of course, because it's so far-reaching, and it's not always easy to deal with that. And I think that's on the next slide, but statistically, so each one here, so who of you knows somebody who died by suicide? Wow. And who of you knows someone who died by suicide? And I'm shocked. That's, wow. So many of you. And statistically, each one of you through their life will have been affected by a suicide death. That's how far-reaching it is. Okay, let's move on to the research. So research found that there is no single cause for suicide. Usually it's several stressors that come together, and stress in life, health issues, whatever it is, they converge to cause that hopelessness and despair in that person. So it's not just one single thing that happens. The next slide. "95% of people that die by suicide have a mental health condition. That might have been known or not known. They might have been treated or not treated. But that's a huge percentage. And that includes, drug use, and so on. But often it's others like depression and anxiety. And that all goes in hand with each other. There's not really a clear-cut line between one or the other, but 95% do have a mental health issues. And I know of people that, I know a woman, she lost her son, and they did not see any signs. Does that mean that person was really not struggling at all? No, because especially men tend to, if we're honest with each other, men tend to cover it up. What man talks about their emotions? Not many, unless you're in the counseling field. But that was not meant to be whatever. That was not meant to be condescending. I hope it didn't sound like it. But, it's just a fact. It's harder for men to talk about what's going on in their life and how they're feeling and seek out help. Okay, let's go to the next one. And that's the same. So 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health struggle, disease, illness, crisis. but they will not, most of them will not go on to die by suicide. I know a lot of people who have depression, anxiety, and so on, and most of them are not even at risk for dying by suicide. Again, it's all those factors that usually come together. The next one. So research has found that, that there is actually a difference, they can actually find differences in the brains of those who have died by suicide and those who have died by other causes. And those differences are mainly in the structure and the function of the brain, and mainly involve the impulsivity that we talked about earlier, and the problem solving. Because if you're impulsive, you tend to make impulsive decisions, and it doesn't take long for you to die if you make that impulsive decision to die. And also problem solving. If somebody has problems with problem solving, they face a challenge and that they're not able to get through that challenge. They cannot think through that challenge. They cannot see there's a way out of that challenge. So that's why there's the difference. Okay, next. Most people, oh, I missed that. Oh, well. Most people that die by suicide are ambivalent of dying. I don't know, have you seen that of the young man that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge? He says, he was jumping and regretting that he jumped the moment he jumped. He survived, so he was able to tell that story. But so they really don't want to die. They still want to live, but they are in so much pain and so much despair and so much distress that they don't see a way out. And we've also learned that through the research. I lost my path here. That's okay. So the perspective of, we talked about that just now. So in a crisis situation, you can't really think straight. So I want you to imagine the worst pain you have ever felt. Can you imagine a time when you had really, really severe pain, the worst pain you've ever had? Okay, at that time, would you have been able to give instruction for somebody to go to your house or even remember the address? Probably not, because in those moments, we are not able to think clearly. And it's the same with the person who is suicidal. They are so under stress and so much pain, and that's not necessarily physical pain. It can be physical pain, or it can be both physical and emotional, or only emotional pain. But they're in so much pain that moment that they cannot think straight. They cannot think clearly. And that's important to see. So they really don't see a way out. And they think that's it. I remember my son saying, before he died, he had several episodes, and saying, my daughter would be much better off without me. And I think that's what he thought in the end too. But, they just don't see a way out of that, and they don't see a way of changing things. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's look at the risk factors. So usually, if we look at the risk factors, like with the risk factors for heart disease, if you have high blood pressure, you have a risk factor. If you eat bad, you have a risk factor. If you don't move, don't exercise at all, you have a risk factor. The same is the case for suicide. So we have those risk factors, and they usually have to combine. So you have health factors, you have historical factors, and environmental factors. And I'm going to step away here for a moment. So usually the highest risk for suicide is right up there in the middle, where they overlap, when everything comes together, when all the factors come together. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which talks about the health factors. I just want to catch up with my things here. Anyway, so health factors is anything that has to do with your, general health. It can be things like mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. If somebody has bipolar disorder, especially if it's untreated, or if you know it, you know it. People with bipolar disorder, they're especially notorious for that. They tend to get on medication, feel better. Once they feel better, they get off medication. Then things go down the drain again. They might start medication and so on. So people that have bipolar disorder, especially during the time they are not medicated, are at a very high risk. It's actually one of the highest risks you can have to die by suicide. Substance use disorder, that's what we're here for. That's what we heard about this morning already. Even the changes in the brain, even with marijuana use and so on, a big risk for that. Okay, and many that have those health factors, they don't realize that they've gotten bad. You know how things go down the hill slowly and you don't even know where you're at till you're all the way at the bottom. So they might not even know, they might not even realize that they need help, that they need to reach out for professional help. Okay, let's go to the next one. Historical factors. If there's a family history of suicide and a family history of mental health issues, it's a risk factor. Past trauma of sexual abuse, combat stress, then of course childhood abuse in general, and any loss, such as the loss of a family member or of a friend. Could also be a loss in a sense of divorce or things like that. You have a greater risk with that. Again, most people that have somebody in their family that has a mental health issues will not have problems, but when those risk factors combine. Okay, let's go to the next one. If you look at environmental factors, so that's the circumstances of a person's life. It also means that if they have access to lethal means, and that's why we're giving out the gun locks out there. The access to lethal means is a great risk factor. I know, for example, aside from my son that died, one of my other sons, after his brother died, started struggling a lot. About 2 years ago, he was severely suicidal. He doesn't live here in Lubbock, he lives in Colorado, and his wife was just really good at it. So she took him in, she made him go seek help, and he did go seek help. And he agreed to put his gun that he had under lock. So she put that away so that he could not access that, and I'm forever thankful for that. The easier it is to access something, the easier that decision is made. Then if you look at drugs, same thing. And drugs, looking at medication. I don't know how many of you have opioids or other medications in their cabinet. They are easily used as a suicide method, so keeping those under lock is great. Also looking at the bridge, they've added some barriers at bridges that were commonly used for suicide, and they actually showed that the suicide rate in that whole area went down afterwards. And just talking about the bridge, it reminds me of a story, and that has to do with just being aware and paying attention what is going on. It was last fall. It was probably November or so. I went to teach my water class, and I left early, which never happens. So I was really early. So I'm driving up there thinking, I don't even know why I'm so early. And there was this young man on the bridge. He was walking. And I thought, something is off. Something is off. And then out of the corner of my eye, I just saw when he put his leg over the bridge barrier. And right away, go on to call 911. There was an exit right away afterwards. I turned around and come back and took a time. And he had gone off and on several times in between. And I did make some mistakes there. I learned from that interaction because, I approached him too quickly and so on. He did not end up dying by suicide. He ended up being taken into custody, and he was definitely under the influence, which I already could tell when he was still on my side. But afterwards, I thought, I wonder how many people called that in. How many people, and he didn't only put his leg over once, it was several times. So I was just curious. I thought, I wonder how many people called this in. There was gazillion cars driving by. I mean, it wasn't rush hour traffic, but a lot of cars driving by. So I called whatever that place is where you call in your 911 number, the dispatch. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's one of my German things. Sometimes I can't think of the words. Anyway, there was one other person that called it in. And I'm sure other people saw that too. You can't tell me that nobody else saw that there was a young man intoxicated getting his leg over the bridge. So we got to pay attention. We got to pay attention not just in our families, but everywhere. You never know what life you save by doing that. I don't know what happened with him afterwards. Obviously, there's privacy issues. I would like to know if he got treatment or what happened with him, but at least that moment he did not die. So at least something. Then if you look at prolonged stress, that's also a risk factor. Stress at work, divorce, unemployment, all of those things. I mean, I'm sure you all know what your stresses are. We all have stress, but if that stress lasts too long and is too significant, that can really be a risk factor. If we go to the next slide. So to understand better what that means and to realize that it's really not just one thing that causes somebody to die by suicide. We are so quick, if we hear somebody died by suicide, oh yeah, that's what, because he was getting divorced and his wife was so mean. I'm guilty of that. My son, his daughter was 1 year and 3 months old when he died, and he was in a bad relationship. A woman that would not let him become sober, that kept on pulling him back and out of treatment and so on. And if you hear, I'm probably still bitter about that. I'm trying to work on that. But that was not the cause. It was one of the components of him dying. But he had a mental health issue. He used drugs. He had drugs in his system the time he died. So there is more things going on in somebody's life than just the one thing. So be careful what you judge, what you say about others. It's good to find out. And sometimes we don't know the background. I know, one of my son's friends, he died by suicide at the age of 16 after his girlfriend broke up with him. And then she died by suicide 2 weeks after. So it's easy to say he died because she broke up with him and said something to him. But that's not the whole story. So there's usually more involved in the background than we actually notice. Okay, let's go to the next one. So the importance of research. So research actually looks at different things. They look at biomarkers, for example, like something in the blood where you could notice somebody is in severe distress to be at risk. And this is looking at the future. And treatment, I know CBT is really used a lot in people struggle with mental health, or, there's other treatment options. Most of you probably know a lot more about that than I do, but we're also always looking at new treatment options. And then the programs and interventions, if you look at AFSP, the programs that we're presenting, and, how we're preventing suicides and how we deal with somebody, for example, after a suicide attempt or with suicidal ideation. And then, of course, medication. There's always, you're probably well aware of that. There is 2 ways to treat. It's usually a combination of psychological treatment plus medication, or sometimes one is enough. Sometimes it's enough for somebody to change regular life factors like getting exercise, getting out. But, sometimes you need medication, and sometimes you need medication and psychotherapy, and sometimes you need both. We're going to the next one, to prevention. Okay, so those are the protective factors that help with it. Getting the appropriate mental health care. If you have the sniffles, do you always go to the doctor? Probably not. So if you're a little bit down, do you seek treatment? You don't have to, really, because, our lives go up and down a little bit each time. You all have had times in your life when you've been down without having actual major depressive disorder or anything like that. But if you have pneumonia, do you go to the doctor? Definitely. So going to the doctor, getting the right treatment, mental health treatment, whenever necessary, is the best thing to do. And then the risk. We have the risk factors and we have the protective factors, and those are the protective factor. Just being proactive about your mental health, even if it is just reaching out to a friend and talking about it. We all have that friend that hopefully that we can talk to, that just lifts us up, those good people in our life that we can go to no matter what, and that's a good thing. Feeling connected to community, no matter what. And that's actually one thing. I've done several continuous education classes in my occupational therapy field, but about mental health, about suicide. That's one thing they always mention. It's the connectedness is one of the big factors. Having people, having family to reach out to, having others to reach out to. And that can be, for example, a faith community too, if you're in such. It can be a work community, possibly. So just being connected helps. However, if somebody is struggling with mental health, addiction, whatever it is, those connections tend to erode. And that's when things go downhill, okay? That's when things are difficult. But in those moments when people are pulling back, when they're isolating themselves, still reaching out to them and reminding them of their strength and of the good things in them, the things that they have going for them, already helps. If we go to the next one, and it's looking at, if you look at that connectedness, it's also giving a sense of purpose. Somebody without a purpose, if I look at people in active addiction, they usually don't see a purpose in life. Or their purpose is the addiction, I guess. But, anybody struggling even with depression, that's always lacking that purpose. And finding that purpose or helping people find that purpose is important. And the community, the connectedness you are in, the little pockets of support really help with that. Mental health care is important. You all know that. We seek treatment if we have a physical condition. Why not seek treatment if we have a mental health condition? Because of the stigma? Yes, but we got to overcome that. We got to get away from that. And that's actually one thing that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention found, is that 94% of people think that suicide is preventable. More than 60, I think it was almost 70% of people don't know how. And they also found that we're getting better. People know more about mental health. I think we've all done a wonderful job with that. People know that mental health is important, but that step from mental health, from knowing that, and from taking the step to actually getting help, there is still a disconnect. And AFSP is really working hard, with their programs and everything to really find that missing link and find how do we get the people to not only understand and talk about it more, but really get the help whenever they need it. And I think, maybe you have some ideas. You know what I'm saying? You can be that missing link that can bring somebody from just being aware of mental health to actually seeking help. Okay, the next one. Oh, yeah, we had that. Discussing, we all know that, if you go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, getting the right diagnosis, getting the treatment, and this can look different for everybody. Finding the right treatment for the right person. And if you've ever been on any medications for mental health conditions, you know that sometimes it's trial and error to get there, to find the right match, of therapist also. So really finding the right treatment for that individual is important. And I have a hard time with that the law has to cover the mental health conditions. Does it really? In my experience, it doesn't. So we're still having a long way to go with there. I shared that story with somebody earlier. So my son, he was at a inpatient drug treatment facility down in between San Antonio and Austin. We kind of knew things weren't perfect for him there. He wasn't responding the way he did when he was at the ranch. He came back, and 2 weeks later, he was dead. And the day after he died, we got a letter from the insurance saying that they denied to pay the last 2 weeks of his 4-week stay because he was under no danger to himself or anybody else. So I think we have a long way to go. We're getting better. It's getting better. But are we good yet? Probably not. But there's not much we can do in that field. There's other people in charge of that, unless, aside from advocating for it. But there's still a long way, I think, from having everything covered that should be covered. And it should be covered. We're covering the sniffles, we're covering diabetes, we're covering everything. But we're not covering mental health services enough. So, and I think Lubbock is doing really well getting the resources together and really having places that most people can go to. So that's a good thing. And I think we need to continue to really work together. And what I would love, and I think there is something like that out there, but really getting our resources together, really that everybody knows where you can send anybody. That you have that background and that knowledge and know what is out there in the community. We got to get there. Okay, next one. How long do I have? Huh? Okay. And I'm coming to the end. There's always, I tend to start talking and sharing, and it's hard to stay in a time frame for me. I'm not learning my lesson. Anyway, so one part that anybody can do is to, as a preventative thing, is to strengthen their healthcare with self-care. How often do we not take care of ourselves? Especially a lot of you are women here. How often do we give ourselves and give and give and give and don't take care of ourselves? So, but it is important. Good sleep habit, exercise, nutrition, stress management. You want to be healthy in body, mind, and spirit. You need it all. And that helps really with that resilience. If you do that self-care, you're much less likely to get in those down states. Not saying that you're not going to get major depressive disorder and that needs treatment. That's not what I'm saying. But it is one of those protective factors, if you take care of yourself, that can really help. So, I was going to ask you, but I want you to think about it. We're not going to do that sharing, but just think about yourself. What are your go-to self-care things that you do to make you feel better, to de-stress? Can be exercise, can be walking outside, can be taking a bath, reading a book, having a tea, meeting with a friend, whatever it is. Think about that. What are those things and those are the things we often don't take the time to. But take that time to take care of yourself. It's so important. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our support, so AFSP is really big on the suicide loss support because it is a different kind of loss experience. Other people don't understand. That's why we have the Survivor Day, where we all still have different stories. It's not that our stories are exactly the same, but we understand each other. And that is so important to have that support. So if you know somebody, I said that earlier, if you know somebody who lost someone to suicide, or you have a place to put up the flyer, come and grab one. Very important. And it really, that support, for us is very healing. It reduces our own suicide risk. I don't remember if I mentioned that. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. If somebody in your family died by suicide, you're at a higher risk for suicide. I know a friend who lost 2 children to suicide. I know somebody else who lost a son and then died herself by suicide. So if I look, my children who have not dealt with the death of their brother, they've been struggling at times, severely. 2 of my 4 children. So it really helps us all. And also, that's the case especially for our walk, is the lived experience. So if we talk about lived experience, we talk about somebody who has made an attempt for suicide or who has struggled, supporting those so that they get out of that and that they don't end up at that place again, at that bad place. So all things that we need to work on, or we are working on. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, so one of the biggest thing is, and I mentioned that before, to get time and distance between that crisis and that person being able to go through with it. So talking to them, reaching out to them, listening to them. And that time is enough to diminish that desire. They found that suicidal thought, that thought about really going through with it, often is temporary. It is not a constant thing. It doesn't stay with them. It is really just temporary. How long, everybody is different. But if you can get that person through that exact moment, of the crisis, you're won, at least in that moment, and allowed for them to get the help and get additional treatment and so on, whatever they need. If you go to the next slide. We talked about that several times, limiting the access to lethal means. Research actually looked at that, and they found that, for example, if somebody had thought about using a gun, and that gun is put under lock and key, they're not thinking about other means to ending their life. It's usually one plan, okay? So getting rid of those lethal means really helps. And I think that's in I don't know if it was in the other slide. If you go to the next slide. Yes. They talked about installing, and this is just suggestions, installing a carbon monoxide detector so that the car turns off if that level gets too high. Then the barriers on the bridges, blister packaging for medication so that it just takes longer for them to open that. Seems kind of weird, but it's again that time factor. If you get time between that can help. And then secure the firearms. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to what we can do to prevent the suicides. The biggest thing is having a caring conversation. Caring, non-judgmental, active listening. The way I know what where you all are coming from, or hopefully a lot of you have learned that in your training, how to be an active listener. Just listening to them, help them share their story, help them share their concern. That's half the battle. That shows them that you care about them. And it helps you also to get more information. What are their real struggles? Maybe you have no idea what that person is struggling with. And then they can convey that to you. And the next slide is watch out for warning signs. So we have the risk factors that we talked about. The risk factors, usually they're there for a long time. It's nothing like your genetics, you can't help them. They are there. So a lot of the risk factors go on for a long time, but the warning signs usually mean that something is getting closer, that they're really struggling, and that really something needs to happen. If you go to the next slide, one of the warning signs is how they talk. So most people, if you go to the next slide, most people actually do talk about ending their lives, but some do it a little bit more covered, not as obvious. They might be joking about it. Well, I know my son, he said several, yeah, I tried to get in the car, and it didn't work. So some people say that out loud. They might say things like, I don't have a reason to live. I'm just a burden. I have no prospects. What am I here for? Feeling overwhelmed, some might say. Or they might say, I'm just in so much pain. And again, that's not necessarily physical pain. I'm just in so much pain. I don't know what to do anymore. And that they might feel trapped. If you go to the next one, that's the behavior. They might increase or might start drinking alcohol or drugs, or using drugs, or might increase their drug or alcohol use. They might have issues with sleep, and that can be less sleep or sleeping all the time. That can be either or. They might start acting recklessly, like, driving like crazy, not caring if they get in an accident, or just doing stupid stuff. Ooh, my voice is giving out. And they might things they've always done, things they love to do, they might just not do them anymore. They isolate from family and friends, very common. And that's when you don't really know that they are struggling, because you don't see them. I know when my daughter, the times she does not call me, I know she's not doing well. And then I call her, because that's very typical. Usually she calls me. But if her mental health is not so well, she does not call. They might be looking for a way to kill themselves if you notice any browsing history or maybe buying a gun or anything like that. And they might give away possessions, like the video we saw, Out of the Dark. Talk Away the Dark, when he gives away his guitar. So that's all things that should make you hear up and listen up. Their mood. They might be more depressed than usual, more anxious. They might also get angry. And then we think, what's wrong with them? But, be aware of that anger can just be a sign of them struggling. And, if you look at teenagers, a lot of them are angry, aren't they? Or at least have times where they're angry at. But the biggest thing is any change you notice in any of those. Irritability, impulsivity. On the other hand, if you look at the last point, sudden unexplained happiness. Sometimes you really know they're in a bad place. They're really struggling with depression or whatever it is they're struggling with. And suddenly they are happy, they are joking, seem perfectly normal. Oh, thank you. And that can be a sign that they actually made their peace and that they made that final decision to end their lives. Speaking of, one thing they didn't even mention in that, if somebody is in a inpatient treatment facility, for example, mental health or addiction recovery, doesn't matter, often when they get out, they're also at a higher risk, just because they're out of that safe environment that they were protected in, and then come back out. But that's aside from that. Okay, let's do, so big thing, just look at the change there is and trust your gut. If you think something might be wrong, ask. Talk to them. Might be a patient, might be a friend, might be a child, might be a partner, whoever it is. If you think something is off, ask them. Trust your gut. The worst thing that can happen is that they say, oh, no, I'm fine, but I've been struggling with this and that. That's the worst thing that can happen, that they confide in you anything else or that they say they're okay. But we gotta become more outspoken about that. And outspoken about ourselves. If we are struggling, the same is the case. Reach out for help. Find somebody you can talk to. Okay, next. When you reach out, something to avoid is minimizing their feeling. You don't want to shrug it off. You just want to have that active listening in general, not just minimizing what they are going through. Don't convince them, don't start philosophical conversations with them. Oh, your life is worth living. That's usually not helping. Don't try to fix it. All they need is somebody to listen to and to share. Most of the time, if my husband tries to fix things for me, I get mad at him. Ooh. I didn't just say that, did I? Can you cut that out? You know what I'm saying? We don't like people wanting to fix things for us. That's not helping us. Just talk in private, pull them aside, private conversation, wherever it is, at work, at church, with clients, whatever it is, pull them aside, talk to them in private, listen, express concern and caring. And you do that with the active listening, and That's often enough. That's one reason why the 988 number works so well. 98% of people that call the 988 number do not go on at that moment to die by suicide, because all they need is to get through that moment, to have the time to get through that moment of crisis, to have somebody to talk to. That's all it often takes. Not everybody, but that's what it takes for a lot of people. And then ask directly about suicidal thoughts. Some people are under the impression that if I ask them if they are thinking about ending their life, that I will cause them to end their life. That is not the case. Research has actually shown that. I've asked so many people, and I do that with my patients also at Trust Point in inpatient rehab. I ask them, if I notice something, I ask them, do you feel depressed? Are you sad? What's going on? I ask them if somebody tells me, and I've had patients that told me, I just don't want to live. I said, are you actively thinking about ending your life? No, 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 no. I just don't mind if I die. That's a difference. But if you don't ask that, you will never know, and you might miss that occasion to help the ones that need that question asked. And again, it's that opportunity to have a conversation, to have them share what's going on. That's what we need. Okay, next. And then, encourage them to seek help. That's what we want, because even if I know you're all professionals, or most of you are professionals. If it's in your private life, you should not try to counsel that person. You should get them to get to the place where they get the help. But that's a good thing to do. If you really think they might make an attempt soon, then or if they really say no, or if they're there with their gun or whatever it is, or on the bridge, then you really need to stay with them. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves that I've seen who else here works in a hospital? Oh, I guess I'm the only one. But anyway, I still share that because it might pertain to you too. Like in the hospital, and that's a rehab hospital, that's not the acute hospital. If we have somebody suicidal, okay, they come in, take the curtains down, the shower rod, they take everything away, and nobody goes in there. Because I might have to talk to that person. Nobody goes in there in a time of crisis when they need somebody just to be there for them and to talk to them. And the same is the case, stay with them. If you really directly worry about somebody, stay with them. Help them secure the lethal means. Okay, I have to add to that. If your life is in danger, leave, okay? We don't want, and I was interested when I called the guy on the bridge, when I called 911, one of the first things she asked was, does he have a weapon? And so she would not have wanted me to approach him if he had a weapon, and I probably wouldn't have. But you got to be safe about yourself. If you have a patient or a client that is completely outraged and thrashing or whatever, don't stay with them. That's a moment when you need to step away and just get help and call 911. But what I'm saying is, if possible, if it's a normal situation, then stay with them. And escort them to mental health services. Biggest thing you can do. I was so impressed in Colorado, in Fort Collins, Colorado. They have a 24-hour mental health clinic, 24/7. Anytime, anybody struggling. My son has been there several times since. Only once he was admitted. The other times, he talked to somebody and then was fine to go. Woo! I think we're getting here in Lubbock, slowly but surely. You can dream, is that right? Okay, next. Okay, I hope you all know the 988 number, the suicide line. What happened, and then we have the text line. 741741, both in English and in Spanish. And what happens, you get connected, when you call that, you get connected to somebody in the area that talks to you over the phone or texts over the phone. If there is nobody available in that area, then they source it out. And again, that's where we have to get better at staffing and getting the funds to staff those. Woo. Questions? Thoughts? Stories? Nobody? Okay, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, the next one. Okay, remember our survey? On this presentation, I did not add my contact information. Come outside, grab a business card. I apologize for that. But come outside, grab a business card, grab those flyers. You can talk. I'll be out here for the rest of the day, so please feel free to ask me any questions if there's no open questions here. I know, again, it's a sensitive subject and not everybody feels comfortable to asking those questions outright. So I hope you went away, you learned something today that you can take away for your life or for your professional life. And we would love volunteers to help us. And we would love to help all the needs in the community that are there. Let me know if there's any places we can help you with presentations or information or talks or anything like that. And if there's no questions, thank you so much. But please fill out the post-test. No, it's not a test.